one of the lead authors of this research. How disappointed are you by it?
So good evening to you. Clearly, any negative result is a disappointment, but unfortunately, to some extent, it was predictable because studies over the past few weeks have clearly indicated that even past infection with the original virus that was circulating in South Africa was not conferring protection against reinfection due to the variant. But I think importantly to emphasize is that this speaks to mild infection. And based on the AstraZeneca vaccine and the J&J vaccine using a very similar sort of technology in terms of its development, as well as the immune responses being comparable, the J&J vaccine in South Africa against the variant has been shown to reduce moderate to severe disease by 57% and severe disease by as much as 89%. So I think there might still well be a role for the AstraZeneca vaccine, at least in terms of protecting against severe disease, but unfortunately not so for mild and moderate infection due to the variant that's circulating in South Africa, and that has really dispersed into many other countries as well.
Of course, we're watching with interest because we do have now cases of the South African variant here in the UK, which we're trying to surge test for and stamp out. But of course, the implications for you in South Africa are much more profound, not least because if you do have to move to the J&J, the Janssen vaccine, that will have potentially cost implications as well.
It certainly would, because the planning was around the AstraZeneca vaccine as being the main source of vaccine that South Africa would procure. So it would have cost implications. But I think also in the UK, it's not about keeping the borders shut and avoiding the emergence of these sort of variants. Even the Kent variant in the UK, the variant that was originated in Kent as an example, has already started to mutate and started to develop mutations that include critical components that are part of the mutation of the variant that was first identified in South Africa. So I think this is going to be a natural evolution of the virus, and not just one where these variants are imported into another country, but rather the evolution of the virus when faced with immune pressure that's induced by natural infection or even vaccine-induced.
So can I infer from that you're opposed to the border being shut between the UK and South Africa?
It's going to serve very little purpose. I think you're going to see it. In fact, the virus has already disseminated into many countries. And to believe that you're going to be able to control the spread of the virus by keeping the borders shut, the question also is how long are you going to keep your borders shut? These variants are not going to disappear from South Africa. They're going to continue circulating throughout Africa, and they've already probably spread to many of the neighboring countries with a huge amount of traffic that takes place between South Africa or not. So it will probably be a need for the world to shut its borders, not just to South Africa and Africa, but also to Brazil, because there's a variant that's currently circulating in Manaus in Brazil, which is equally worrisome as the South African variant. So I think there needs to be a recalibration in terms of how we think about the COVID-19 pandemic and the role that vaccines are going to play moving forward.
OK, very interesting. Just going back to your research in terms of the AstraZeneca vaccine, I know that there hasn't been much research into its efficacy in serious cases. It's thought that there is some confidence that it would still work in terms of the South African variant. Is that your belief?
I do believe so. So I believe that T-cell immunity probably plays a more important role in terms of protecting against severe disease. I think antibodies are important, especially for upper respiratory illnesses, and that is the mild spectrum of disease. But when it comes to severe disease, it's difficult to explain the Janssen results without it being because of something else other than antibody. Because like I mentioned, the antibody responses between the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine are in fact almost identical. So there's something else that's working in terms of protecting against severe disease, and all indications are that the T-cell responses that are induced by the vaccine are less affected in terms of the virus being able to evade that particular response.
Meanwhile, in the UK this week, there's been discussion about, well, in fact, there's been a new trial launched into the mixing of vaccines, perhaps a different dose for the second to the first. Of course, lots of people will be disappointed by the results of your study, but there is reason to be hopeful about new emerging approaches to this disease, isn't there?
Most certainly. And I don't think this is the end of the game. I mean, I think we were somewhat euphoric from the first initial results that were being reported of 5% efficacy, but that was we're experiencing circulation of a very different virus now. And at the end of the day, it's not that vaccines are going to eradicate the virus in the near future, not even in the distant future. It's about how we wanting to prioritize the use. And from my own perspective, it's about saving lives. It's about preventing hospitalizations. And I think even the current generation of vaccines have got a huge role to play, be it the AstraZeneca vaccine or be a combination of other vaccines. They have got a huge role to play in terms of having an immediate impact on saving lives of people. And the challenge still remains the rollout of these vaccines and equity of distribution globally.
We're having a few problems with the line, but I want to persevere given the relevance of you to this story. And I just want to ask you finally about the question of vaccine distribution. There have been serious questions being raised from around the world about the hoarding by Western nations, particularly South Africa's president has spoken out about this. Is it your view that perhaps once the UK has started immunising everyone over 50, that they should be donating their vaccines to you guys in South Africa?
Well, it's not only the UK, it's also countries such as Canada that have subscribed to more than 5 times what's required for their population. And I think those sort of initiatives should be started immediately, not after they've got 100% coverage in the specific populations. Because I think what we're facing right now, as everyone appreciates, is a global emergency. And the more that we allow, the less people that are vaccinated, the more infections that take place in countries such as South Africa and other countries, the greater the likelihood that there's going to be evolution of other variants that are even going to become more resistant to the naturally induced immunity. So what we're going to be facing is continuous evolution of the virus with further variants that are going to become available. Those are going to eventually spread into the high-income countries who are essentially using first-generation vaccines. And then you're going to start seeing outbreaks because of these variants, which we haven't been able to control outside of high-income countries because of lack of access in those other countries to COVID-19 vaccines.